What is going on, y'all? Welcome back to the Running and Gunning podcast with your host, Justin Sinan. So stoked to have you all joining us this morning, whenever you're listening. Just know we appreciate each and every one of you out there. I wanted to share this experience with you guys. This is going to be great for the timing of the year and what we got going on as far as getting your strength conditioning and getting your shoulders in good shapes. We've got Christain Williams from Pennsylvania. Christain has some of you guys may have heard of him, some of you might not have, but he has started Archery Strong, and it's an awesome page dedicated to really breaking down your muscle groups and the best ways to really get the longevity out of your shoulders. So we're going to dive into a little bit of that, a little bit of whitetail hunting. Christian's a big whitetail guy. And without further ado, how you doing, brother? What's going on?
I'm doing well, Justin. Thanks for having me, and thanks for anybody that feels like tuning in and listening to this conversation today. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. Yeah, man. I know we've been playing, cat and mouse. There's been a couple times I think we tried to get on and it just didn't work out. But I know you got a newborn now, so congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank
New
you.
dad. That's awesome, dude. It doesn't get any better than your first one. So congrats on that.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate
Why
it.
don't you give us a little breakdown of how you got started doing Archery Strong and maybe a little bit of your background on how you like to hunt whitetails in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a very passionate bow hunter, and at the same time, I've from kind of middle teenage years loved the realm of strength and conditioning and human performance. So I've really pursued both of those things heavily, particularly in the past decade, the fitness and human performance side, and then the bow hunting side. And um, without getting into too much early detail, in college, I was studying exercise science. And at that time, I was really getting into bow hunting as well. And through my studying of exercise science, I got a job at a sports injury office called Next Level Spine and Sports Injury Center, where I did some injury work, some injury prevention, some rehab, some strength and conditioning training. And at the same time, I was not only doing a lot of bow hunting for whitetails, but here in Pennsylvania, I was like neck deep in bow hunting for groundhogs, which maybe we can get into at some point. But that's really how I cut my teeth bow hunting as a teenager. And I was shooting a lot. I was hunting pretty much every day, being a college student or right out of college. It was having fun was more of a priority than working at that point. So I was doing a lot of shooting, a lot of hunting, and working at this sports injury and sports performance office. And along the way, I found that they definitely had a connection point as far as we like to shoot a lot, we like to hunt a lot. And to me, the question I started to ask as I was enjoying those things so much is there anything that could prevent me from doing this for the long term? Getting to bow hunt as much as I want, shoot as much as I want. And one of the big things that stuck out, especially in my field of work, was injuries, particularly to the shoulder girdle. And the shoulder girdle involves everything from the shoulder joint into the chest, into the upper back, down into the upper extremities, meaning the arms. And there's different problems that can arise there for different guys and girls, as you expose yourself to more shooting, more training, more adventures in the woods, whatever it might be. And those are issues that can potentially cause us to have to shoot less, put down the bow for a while, switch to a crossbow, whatever it might be. And it's become very apparent in my life, particularly over the past 10 years, of how much archery and bow hunting means to me, in the sense that on my best days, I've been bow hunting and shooting my bow, and some of my worst days I've escaped into the woods or, gone and shot my bow. And that's something that I never want to be taken away from me. And I ultimately don't want it to be taken away from other people as well. So what I essentially did was combine that sports injury and sports performance experience and education with archery and bow hunting, and have found a way to work with different bow hunters and different archers on issues related to injuries. And then I also work with some different competition archers and competitive archers for performance related needs too. So I'm essentially applying strength training, biomechanics, and corrective exercise / rehab exercise to work with any bow hunter archer that has issues that they don't want to prevent them from enjoying archery and being successful.
Well, I'll be the first to tell you, you're going to have a new client because I am experiencing extreme pain in my shoulder that I've never had before. I grew up racing motocross and I took a
Uh-huh.
lot of
Oh
injuries
yeah.
to my shoulders. But when I was younger, I never had anything extreme other than, dislocating the shoulder.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But man, so I did an elk hunt last year and I really went deep into my fitness program
Cool.
and getting in really good shape. And, as whitetail season came in after the elk hunt, I weaned off a little bit because I'm a
Sure.
obsessive hunter. And as much as
Sure.
I can be in the woods, I want to be hunting. So I did do a little bit of fitness, but I kind of weaned off.
Yeah.
And I got back into it and I'm doing great. And I pushed it a little bit. And I definitely felt a tear in my left shoulder. And
Mhm.
I've been doing everything I can to just try and build that back up.
Sure.
And and it got me thinking, and I'm like, man, how many other guys? I think your business is just such a perfect, it just fills a great gap that I think we really need is like hardcore bow hunters.
Sure.
And no matter what age, a lot of our guys listening are younger, maybe middle aged, and I feel like I don't care who you are, you need to try to do this either preventive or maintenance on your body to just, keep those muscles good so we can keep bow hunting, like you said, as long
Yeah.
as we possibly can. And I
Absolutely.
mean, what would you say is the most common, for some of your clients, the most common injury you see, and is it preventable?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. And the most common issues that I see are pretty uh, close in proximity to that shoulder joint. So, if you follow your bicep, your tricep up your arm, and you get to what we traditionally think about as the shoulder joint, there's a variety of muscles, ligaments, tendons, joint structures, cartilage, all sorts of different important structures that all play a role in the ability to move the shoulder, the ability to be comfortable in the shoulder, the ability to feel strong in the shoulder. And just like any machine, and a perfect example for this conversation is a bow, just like any machine, like a bow, that has different working parts. Sometimes those parts either become under equipped, sometimes they become out of tune, sometimes they endure some wear and tear, or sometimes separate from archery, you're just coming into archery or bringing a shoulder into archery that has had a history of injury, that has had a history of problems, and they affect us in archery. So there's again a lot of different working parts and pieces that I'll look at and work on there, but ultimately we want a shoulder that functions as well as possible, meaning it moves well, it has adequate range of motion, it is strong, it is stable, and it can endure the repetition that is required for practicing archery, or even just that single repetition when you're in an all-day rut sit and you're cold, you're stiff, and you go to draw your bow, and that shoulder has to function in those less than ideal conditions to be able to feel good, make a confident shot, and not run into issues in those particular instances. So the list is certainly very long for things that we can do to either be proactive in regards to making sure that shoulder is in working condition to serve you in archery and bow hunting, or if there is an existing issue, how do we manage that? How do we make the most out of that issue and get that shoulder to do as much as we can with as little pain and problems as possible, and then as well as start to clear that issue up and put us on a better path towards feeling better and having that shoulder perform with good longevity so that it's not an issue for the years to come in archery hunting. So quick things that pop into my mind is first and foremost, we have to recognize that in 2024, modern day, modern society, the way that we live our lives, 99% of us, or maybe 95% of us, if we account for guys that do challenging blue collar work, 95% of us are not as active and as physically equipped and physically built up as we would have been throughout history. Meaning, I
Right.
work on a computer a lot throughout the day. A lot of people have either computer jobs or white collar jobs where they're just not using their bodies. And a lot of our hobbies tend to be non-physically related, whether it's watching a sports game or whether it's, shooting firearms or golfing or just things that aren't well-rounded in their ability to develop us physically. So why that's important is we're now, again, in 2024, in this modern day, we're now bringing bodies into archery that is physically taxing and requires a certain level of physical ability. We're bringing bodies that are under-equipped, under-prepared, not sufficiently built up into drawing and shooting 70-pound bows or whatever it may be for dozens of arrows, hopefully, if you're practicing consistently. And
Right.
that tends to clash, where you've got an under-equipped machine trying to repeatedly perform a job, meaning archery, that demands repetitive physical load every time you draw, hold, and shoot your bow. So with that all being said, it goes a long way to do some sort of strength training, some sort of exercise, some sort of outside training that is going to improve the body's ability to withstand and tolerate the challenges of archery. So that really is first and foremost in a big focus on what I do. Now, when we get into shooting, there's a lot of variables and a lot of factors that can be very helpful for guys as far as managing the arrow volume you're shooting, as far as not shooting too much and getting excessive to where you're wearing and tearing beyond what your body can handle, but also not shooting too little to the point where we're out of shooting shape. These muscles, tendons, ligaments, and joint structures are not seeing those specific loads and specific movements frequently enough to adapt to it. It's kind of like if you go running once a month. If you go running on a hard run once a month, it's really going to beat you up because your body's not prepared for it. Same thing with shooting, where we need to be shooting consistently, but also at workloads that are manageable with, again, arrow count, draw weight. Are we shooting the appropriate draw weight that fits our body? So that's a big piece. And then we get into the form component, which would be probably the third important thing that I touch on, where we need to be moving well. We need to be moving proficiently. And I intentionally don't say we should be moving correctly, because there's a really big importance on moving in a way, drawing in a way, holding in a way that fits for our bodies. And that looks a little bit different for every archer. There's certainly a general path that we all should be on in regards to form, but the acknowledgement needs to be made that everybody's going to move a little bit differently. We've got to take into account the history of your body, the history of your shoulders, and make sure that that individual is drawing, holding, and shooting in a way that works for their body, feels good for their body, is comfortable and confident for their body too. So that's a kind of an ongoing process and checklist that needs to be addressed consistently.
I wanted to touch on where you had mentioned, like the amount of shooting. How does a person know like when to stop shooting? Like, let's say, you've taken pretty much from last season to now, and you want to get back into shooting your bow, right? You go out back, you shoot maybe a dozen arrows. At what point do you say, all right, I need to stop? Like fatigue. Is there anything like really key that you could help maybe some of our listeners, like, hey, if you start noticing this or that, it's probably time to just stop and come back tomorrow?
Sure. That's a great question. And the answer to that question is going to hinge on having awareness of what you're feeling in your upper body, in your shoulders, having awareness of what you're feeling, and then taking that feedback that you get from your body and making decisions with that feedback. And what I mean by that is we want to be aware of how we're feeling during shooting, right after shooting, couple hours, or the evening after, and then the following couple of days. Those three time frames are all very important to just take inventory of what you're feeling, again, in your shoulders and your upper body. Is there soreness? Is there tightness? Is there fatigue? Is there what we would maybe consider pain starting to creep up? Or maybe you feel great and maybe you're not having any issues. And based on the feedback you get from your body in those three time frames, during, right after, and the following day, then we can start to make those decisions on, all right, is the amount of arrows that I'm shooting adequate or appropriate for me right now? Do I need to decrease? Do I need to increase? Can I shoot the next day? Or am I feeling like I maybe need a rest day and maybe I should shoot one day, rest the next, shoot one day, rest the next, something like that? Is this draw weight appropriate for me right now? Am I drawing it and feeling smooth with this draw weight, comfortable, confident, and strong? Or is this draw weight...
That was my other Yeah. That was
Yeah,
my other question I had for you is like, how often do you feel like, you have people ego shooting their bows where it's like, oh, well, Cam Haines and Joe Rogan are pulling
yeah,
80 pounds and like,
sure,
I used to lift weights or, whatever. It's
sure,
like,
sure.
I don't know.
Um,
For me, I've always said, and you might agree with this, but if you can sit on your butt in a seated position and draw your bow flat and smooth, that's a good indication of if you're at the proper draw weight. Or,
yeah,
I don't mind shooting a little bit under because if it's super, super cold, I've been in a situation where I could barely draw my bow,
yeah,
and
definitely.
that's not what we want
Yeah,
as
yeah,
hunters.
absolutely, 100%. The test you just laid out is a great one. I actually use a similar test. I have a video on my YouTube page where what happens is if you're seated, and then I like to add an extra component where you're seated with like a post or some sort of straight structure running up your spine. And what you can
Mhm.
do is when you're seated, that takes away a lot of the mechanical leverage we'll sometimes use when a draw weight's too heavy. And then additionally, if you have that feedback of a post running up your spine, not leaning back against it, but you're just seated with that touching your spine, you'll get feedback on whether you're arching your back or whether you're leaning and turning and twisting. And normally, what I've found the best way to test and determine if your draw weight is too heavy is in that seated position and looking at any contortions you have to make through your spine or through your torso, because we can look at kind of what the draw arm's doing, and that can give us some indication, but it's not conclusive. What's typically conclusive is if you have to arch or, again, contort, lean, twist, arch your back to be able to draw that bow. What you're essentially doing is making a compensation through your torso to create mechanical leverage to be able to draw that bow. And that, at that point, that tells you of, hey, this might be a little bit too heavy, or hey, this is appropriate and manageable for you. And the longer I do this, the more that I see a lot of people, not most, but a lot, and maybe I would even say the majority of people are probably shooting a little bit more draw weight than they should be. Now, what's really important to understand is this is a spectrum, right? There's not an edge of the cliff where, hey, I'm good up to 60 pounds, I'm good up to 65 pounds. Oh, I hit 66 pounds and the wheels completely fell off. Normally, it doesn't look like that. Normally, there's a gradual degrading that occurs with our ability and comfort and confidence and strength and smoothness too, of our draw, that we start to get closer and closer towards that point at which it's too much. And that also, again, comes back to some awareness and subjective feel too, where you can do that test we were talking about. That's more objective, but subjectively, we ask our questions and have to be honest with ourselves with those different questions, as far as, okay, I may be able to draw this in my backyard and feel comfortable and strong, but what about when you feel a little bit unstable up in a tree? What about like when last year I had to do a really awkward spinning around in my saddle on the weak side to draw on this doe, to make a shot on her? Or you're cold, or you're really stiff and haven't moved for hours on end from being on the stand, whatever it might be. I have more and more been coming to the conclusion that in a lot of cases, especially if we're talking about whitetails, we're probably going to be better off with a little bit of a lighter draw weight than we will be if we try to push into a little bit of a heavier draw weight and push a little bit closer to that point at which things start to break down. I
Right.
had the very same experience. I think it was 2 years ago. I had always shot 70, low 70s for my compound all through my 20s.
Hmm.
And I was doing some different things. I was starting to shoot a traditional bow more and just do some different things where I kind of had to reassess. And I was like, you know what? I'm getting a lot of indicators that I might be a little bit better off in the upper 60s, dropping 3, 4, maybe 5 pounds for a bunch of different reasons we don't need to get into. But I was using that information to eventually say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to shoot like 68 pounds and be in the high 60s and see how that goes. I had absolutely no problem with penetration. I had absolutely no problem with
Yeah.
deer jumping the string. Everything was good on that front. There were really no costs as far as me going down in draw weight, but I gained a lot. I gained a lot in my comfort of shooting. I gained a lot in my confidence, my ability to shoot from a saddle, my ability to shoot when I was cold or in those weird positions. And
Yeah.
that ended up paying off. So there has to be kind of this internal dialogue that you want to make. And again, honesty is at the forefront of it, where drop the ego aside. It's going to be okay if you do decide to increase, decrease, stay at your current draw weight, but really ask yourself that question: what is going to put me in the absolute best position to not only enjoy archery but to be successful in bow hunting? And a lot of
Right.
times an adjustment in draw weight is called for there.
Yeah, I mean, I cringe, man, watching some of these guys draw when they're on stand or like in a saddle and they're skyrocketing up and coming down, and I'm like, man, I don't know. I'm a big advocate for a very smooth, consistent draw, like in the direction that I'm going to shoot an animal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I really try to practice like that. And I've tried to teach some of my, my friends the same way. It's like, look, man, try to practice how you're going to hunt. Okay. We're shooting our bows, obviously, because I enjoy shooting a bow no matter what, but I try to practice how I want to hunt. And I think too many people are like concerned about like being cool and, oh, I shoot 70 pounds and like flexing. It's like, look, man, it doesn't really matter if you're shooting 50 pounds. I don't really care. Are you killing deer or not? Like what's the end goal for you? And longevity too. I mean, there's so many shoulder injuries that you see. And a lot of my older friends, I have just as many older friends that used to shoot a lot more. And now they're like, man, I had to drop my poundage, or I had to shoot. Now I shoot a way longer axle to axle bow. It's really interesting to talk to some of the guys that are, in their 50s or even in their 60s that are still shooting compounds and hearing their stories. Because, I mean, with the technology we have, if you're a younger guy and you've gotten into archery in let's just say the past 6 to 8 years, right? Like the bows have come so far as far as being able to draw smoother. And I mean, like some of these new bows, even if they're at 70 pounds, it feels like you're drawing 60 pounds, so.
And vice versa.
I think that's right.
There's some
it all
bows
just
that are
depends.
really aggressive.
Right. The cam systems on some of these bows are outrageous on the first, I don't know, the valley or whatever you would call it at the first draw.
Yeah. When it peaks up there. Yeah.
It's about finding what works best for you. I think nowadays bows cost so much money, and I understand, for a lot of these guys that are entry level and getting into archery, it's like, I can only afford this or that. It's like, you don't need to buy a brand new bow. Buy something used that's like a few years old. I mean, like you can get a great deal, but just make sure that you're able to draw smooth and it's something that you're going to be able to shoot long term. I think.
Yeah. And
it's a really important thing that nobody really talks about.
Yeah. And I had a thought that I wanted to toss in there because I think this will be useful for people listening. And that is, if you can do it, if you can find a way to do this, likely probably working with a bow shop or a friend or something, a great way to determine what draw weight you should be shooting is to take your bow, start adjusting the draw weight, and either pretend you have no idea what draw weight it is at, or even better is if you can just not test the draw weight and not really have a sense of where it's at in regards to draw weight, and start playing with it and strictly go based off of feel and completely ignore that number and just go off
that's awesome
of how that feels. It really takes a lot of the mind games away, because I went through it myself. I was at my bow shop a couple of years ago with a tech that I trust and is very good. And we started adjusting it, and the bow and my body just wanted to be in the high 60s. And I was having a hard time getting over the fact that I wasn't up around 70. Just as far as confidence and some ego too, I'll happily admit that. That number in my brain, and knowing that number, what it was, what it used to be, what I wanted it to be, messed with me so much. But eventually I just said, you know what? I'm going to ignore the number. I'm going to follow what the bow shoots best with. I'm going to follow what I shoot best with. And I landed in the high 60s. And getting rid of or ignoring that number can help so much, because it's so easy for us to get caught up on numerical values, right? So much of our lives are
Numbers.
are based on numbers. It could be time, it could be money, it could be the weight of something, it could be whatever, and we're so focused on that. So getting rid of that
Arrow
component
speed,
is, yeah,
and arrow weight it's just,
yeah,
it's mind blowing. And I think that
yeah,
that's what a lot of people are chasing, is like, I want to shoot 300
numbers,
feet per second,
yeah,
or I want to shoot this and that. And it's
yeah,
like, yeah, but that's great if you can do that and you can draw your bow one time and get your bow to do that. But are you
yeah,
going to be able to be accurate? Like, I think
sure,
that's the number one goal as a bow hunter, is to be as efficient as
sure.
possible with where we can put that arrow, and not being busted in the process of doing it when you're hunting,
Yeah, and
you know?
here's maybe the caveat is, go through that process where you ignore the numbers, settle into what truly feels best for you and what works best for your bow, then look at the numbers. And if something jumps out at you, if you're at a 325 grain arrow, I understand where you're like, this isn't going to work, I've got to increase, or the bow's really slow, or whatever it might be. Then you can make some tweaks, but use that uh, that purely going by feel process first, then look at the numbers, see what they've come out to, and see if that's going to be manageable. I'm not a huge equipment guy as far as being excessive with all the different fine tuning numbers, but what I've found is most of the time, if I'm a little bit heavier than I wanted to be, or a little bit lighter in an arrow I wanted to be, or a little bit faster or slower, most of the time it's okay. Uh,
Yeah.
Meaning that it hasn't caused negative consequences for me in the field. And like you just said, Justin, that's the number one priority, is what's going to be successful in the field. And I've shot heavier than I really wanted to be with an arrow, and it was fine. It worked out great last year. I've shot lighter than I wanted to be with an arrow last year, and it was fine. It worked out great. So normally we kind of put these constraints or expectations on ourselves just based off of, honestly, what we sometimes make up in our heads, and it's just not true at all. So
Absolutely. Man, I am really enjoying this. This is
know,
we're getting
glad
into
to
some
hear.
really good stuff that,
Yeah.
I've wanted to talk about, and it's kind of funny how it's tying into, what we're discussing on this, as far as like
Yeah.
trying to maintain your body. But yeah, I mean, the other thing I wanted to touch on a little bit, and you had mentioned, is, traditional archery. Do
Mm-hmm.
you feel, I got into it recently last year, just practicing. I don't feel confident enough to take an animal with it yet.
Sure. Good
But
for
do you
you
feel like
making that distinction.
going to, like, traditional, is it more of a strain on your body, or is it, because I mean, we're shooting a little bit less poundage,
Yep.
generally,
But you're
but
holding more poundage.
it's a lot different weight. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
totally different.
It is
Can
it is
you
very
maybe
different.
touch on a little bit of that?
Yeah. My answer to that is not firm, in the sense that, exactly like you said, the loading of a traditional bow versus a compound is very different. With a compound, that load comes on very quickly, almost to 100%, very early on in that draw cycle, and you're pulling almost 100% of that draw weight until you get over that peak and you stop to and then you start to drop into that valley. Versus a traditional bow, the load gradually builds and it's almost linear, right? As soon as you start to
Mm-hmm.
pull, you're at 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 15, 20, 25. And then once you get to full draw, you're then holding that full draw weight. So with a traditional bow, you're then holding in full draw the full weight of, or the full resistance of the bow, versus a compound, you might be holding 10, 20, maybe 30% if your let off is lower, I guess it would be, not higher. So very different. Now, both of those have pros and cons in regards to the stresses that our body endures. And every arrow from every bow equates to some amount of stress on the joints, tissues, and structures of your body. We're not so much worried about the bigger muscles. They largely can handle it. It's the smaller structures, the tendons, which are the end of the muscles, the ligaments, the joint structures. Those are what we're more mindful and maybe concerned with when we think about the longevity of the shoulders, or if you have a past or present shoulder injury. So again, my answer is not firm. Is one better than the other? I've seen both. I've seen people who have pain and problems with a traditional bow and they go to a compound and they feel a lot better, and vice versa, pain and problems with a compound bow and they go to a traditional bow and feel a lot better. It really just comes down to the individual, the problem they're having, and how we manage that problem. But honestly, I think the more important piece goes back to what we talked about earlier as far as the condition and the overall function of your shoulders. How good is that? The arrow volume you're shooting, the consistency, the draw weight, those types of factors to me are more important, because you can normally make either bow work for you. It's just a matter of playing with all those variables. And with my clients, I take into account all of those factors, and we and make a plan that is going to work within their limits and with what their body will tolerate.
That's awesome, man. I'm a little bit off topic, but not really. Is there any like good nutritional stuff or any good like supplements that you found to kind of help build any, I guess, ligaments or anything like related to that?
Sure.
Is there anything out there?
Yeah, so the basic building block of a lot of the structures of the body, muscles, tendons, are going to be proteins, and the branched chain amino acids, and the different amino acids that come in the protein. Those are going to be the building blocks for a lot of those structures. And based on that, or looking at that component, I'm not a big fan of supplements, and the reason for that is the vast majority of us, myself included, sometimes or most of the time are not proficient enough in our diets and our general eating to worry about supplements. Meaning, in my opinion, this is my opinion, that I want to dial in and nail my nutrition of my whole foods, the foods I'm actually eating, before I worry about supplements. Some people will argue that, hey, you can fill in the gaps with supplements. Yeah, you can, but why not fill in the gaps where they should be filled? And that's
right. It's not sustainable.
Your whole food sources. So I'm a big fan of primarily eating things that were available 10,000 years ago, right? Your meat, fish, eggs, nuts and seeds, fruits and vegetables, your whole grains, some of your roots, potatoes, sweet potatoes, things of that sort. Again, things you could have found 10,000 years ago. That served us pretty darn well. It sustained us for millennia, going back in history, and it's not flawed. It's has worked, and it will continue to work. So again, my priority for me, in my opinion, is getting my eating of those whole foods dialed in. And then if you're truly nailing that, then you can look into supplements. But it's so easy. It's so easy nowadays, especially when you click a button and can buy a supplement, to ignore the holes in your eating and try to fill it with a supplement. Now, the one place that I do think, in regards to structures of our body and aiding there, the one place that can be helpful is if you're really nailing your diet. There are some joint supplements that can be beneficial. Things like the omega-3s and the fish oils and things like that, hyaluronic acid. There's some good research on those. But that to me is a bonus. It's not a necessity. I rather get somebody dialed in those other factors we talked about. How's your form? How's your exercise? How's your daily activities? Your posture, the positions you work in, managing your shooting, your form. All of those things are going to go a lot farther than supplements. And I guess all of this is functioning under the assumption that we all only have so much time and energy. We've got jobs, families, all these different things. So, okay, if I only have a certain amount of time and energy and focus to put into maximizing the things I'm doing to support my body, those real big meat and potatoes, no pun intended, are going to produce the best outcomes, or the more stable outcomes we need to see before getting into supplements. But again, if you're nailing all of those things, then sometimes a little extra protein supplementing can be helpful. Some multivitamin supplementation, some of those joint supplements, things like that on a fairly basic level.
I was told when I was a younger guy, I had an old boss of mine, and he was a huge holistic medicine kind of person, and very, very healthy. I mean, this guy was like in his mid 70s, still doing heating and air conditioning service work, right? just like kind of like a freak of nature, pretty much.
Sure.
Like you wouldn't expect this guy to be in the shape he's in and to be able to do what he was doing. And I really took a lot from him at a younger age to like what he was doing with nutrition and this and that, even though a lot of us when we're younger don't give, a hoot about any of that stuff.
Sure.
And he had told me that one of the biggest things that he did was he would eat chicken cartilage. And he said that it really helped your joints and it helped rebuild. And I don't know if you've ever heard that or not. I was kind of hoping maybe you could like, myth bust that for me or not, if you've heard of that. But
yeah, so the question in hand there is, does eating, I guess, the structure, the joint cartilage, chicken cartilage, does eating that structure help the same cartilage, the same structure in our bodies? And the answer to that question is, I don't know. I don't know.
Gotcha.
That would take some
little
some
off
research.
topic, but hey,
No,
I figured I'd ask you,
Yeah, I think it applies. And is it going to hurt you? No. But the question again there is, can our bodies take that exact structure and somehow through digesting that, does it help the specific structure, meaning the cartilage in our joints? I don't know. That's a great question. That would take some research for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. It'd be interesting to find out. But I think realistically for him was exercise. He was consistent in exercise, consistent in diet, not drinking a bunch of junk, drinking water or tea and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think that goes a long way. And I mean, I feel like it's really cool now. Maybe it's just me, but I look at, the grand scheme of things, and I feel like a lot more people are interested in becoming in better shape and being more conscious of, our nutrition and stuff like that. And I'm excited to see where it goes. And like, it's really cool to see how many people are taking like the Western hunt approach and applying it towards whitetail hunting.
Yeah.
Like being in better shape. I mean, I feel like there's more of a consciousness in the as a total in the hunting industry that like whitetail guys are becoming more diehard. And it's like, okay, how can we, be better at what we're doing? And how can we, get more life out of what we're doing? I know,
absolutely,
we're primarily a mobile hunting, podcast. That's what we really focus on.
Yeah.
And 100%, I mean, almost a lot of the guys that we have on here are in great shape. And that's how they're able to get through an entire season, hanging stands and tearing down. And,
and I as you
think it's important.
As you talk about that, the thought that comes to my mind is you'll hear a lot it being said, you don't need to be in great shape to enjoy hunting. Is that true? Absolutely. Does it hurt you to be in great shape to support hunting? Absolutely not. Does it help you to be in great shape to for hunting? Does it help you to be in great shape for hunting? Absolutely. You know exactly, like you just said, when you're hanging sticks, when you're trying to set your stand, when you're trying to climb up, all those different things, it will only help you to be in great shape. So I think, honestly, just calling it what it is, I think a lot of people who are not in great shape see that movement and it's a little bit threatening and it might seem unnecessary or silly or dumb. And in some cases it's not necessary, but it will only help you to be in good shape. And really, I go back to exactly what we talked about earlier with my business. The whole reason I started my business is you don't want this to be taken away from you. You don't want this to be more difficult physically. You don't want these things to start to hurt when you try to do them. And there will come a point in our lives, might be a while, but there will come a point in our lives where these things start to get more physically challenging. These things start to hurt a little bit. Heck, I hunted, I can think about it vividly. 2 years ago in late season here in Pennsylvania for archery hunting, my meniscus, I have a torn meniscus in my knee and it was flared up. And it absolutely made hunting in mobile hunting more difficult and more unpleasant. It was more difficult to climb my sticks. It was more uncomfortable to stand in my saddle. And I don't want that. It's worth it to me. And I know it's worth it to a lot of people to not have to deal with those headaches. To
very
feel
mental.
better.
And I mean, when you have something holding you back, it's like, all right, am I going to go over that next ridge? Am I going to do this? Oh, I'm not feeling, And
Yeah.
that's really what it breaks down and it equates to. Like, guys,
Yeah.
like I am not some jacked person. I'm in decent shape. I don't have a six pack, but I can tell you from experience in not being in good shape and, just doing, going to the gym three days a week. I mean,
Sure.
it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And it just makes what we're doing that much easier,
Yeah.
and when
And more
you
enjoyable
don't have
too.
to, yeah, you're not sacrificing, your how do I want to word this, your body, you're not
Yeah.
thinking about, oh well, man, like my arms are sore, my shoulders are sore, my knees, whatever.
Yeah.
It just makes it that much easier to hunt where you need to be instead of thinking about other things. But
Absolutely.
well, dude, let's shift gears a little bit, man. Why don't we get into, I know when I messaged you about doing this, we're like, I'll come on the podcast with you, but we got to talk about hunting.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
get into that, man. Why don't you just give a little breakdown on really how you got started into bow hunting? Were you raised in a family of bow hunters, or was that something you did on your own?
Sure. I did grow up with a dad that I'm very grateful for and blessed that introduced me to the outdoors, introduced me to hunting. He bow hunted. He bow hunted some throughout my childhood. Wasn't necessarily diehard, but definitely bow hunted for whitetails, elk, uh, bears, some different things there. I had a bow from a very young age, and I enjoyed flinging arrows in the backyard. But it wasn't until my teens that I really dove into it because
Mm-hmm.
here in Pennsylvania, we did the tradition of rifle hunting for deer every year. And I liked that. And it was had some neat experiences, but it didn't hook me. It didn't grab me. And it wasn't until my teens that I was moving on from some competitive Olympic weightlifting, competitive CrossFit, that I was looking for a new thing to really pour myself into. And like I said, I had shot a bow and had a bow all growing up, but I decided one summer that I wanted to sell some exercise equipment because I was going to be done competing and use that money and put it into a bow. So I did, and I started practicing, started shooting, and I really was loving the challenge of archery. It just was something that hooked me because it was difficult, and things that are difficult a lot of times tend to suck us in. And after like a month of shooting, I said to my dad, I was sitting around the kitchen table and I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm starting to get pretty proficient with my bow. And, I feel like it'd be neat to go out and do some hunting with it." And he kind of smiled and said, "Well, bud, it's June and there's really nothing in season until the fall. So you might have to just wait and practice more." But then he got a smirk on his face and he said, "Well, you could go try to hunt some groundhogs with a bow." And he had a smirk. He had a smirk on his face because anybody who has tried to hunt groundhogs or woodchucks, whatever name you like to call them, they are very, very, very difficult to get close to. They
Yes.
have great eyesight. They have great hearing. They have a great nose. They've got a hole to escape down into. They're a
They're
very
weary,
prominent
very weary.
prey animal, and they are wary because of that. Meaning, hawks, foxes, coyotes, uh, any bird of prey in the sky likes to prey on them. So, moral of the story is they're difficult to get close to, and everybody who bow hunts knows you've got to get at least moderately close to the animal that you're trying uh, to shoot. So I gave it a shot. I went to some local farms with my bow and arrows tipped with a small game head. First hunt, unsuccessful. Second hunt, unsuccessful. Third hunt failed. Fourth hunt failed. And I think it was sometime around the sixth, eighth, 10th hunt, maybe. I can remember the very, very first groundhog that I hit with my bow. And it was just so exciting and so engaging. And that just lit a fire in me where for the remainder of that summer, I just poured myself into hunting groundhogs with a bow. Essentially, I was going around to different farmers, and farmers don't like groundhogs for the crop damage, for the holes they
Yeah.
dig, hurt, messing up livestock's legs when they step in the hole, or giving problems to farm equipment because of the holes. So farmers want them gone, and it's a pretty easy thing to get permission to. So knocked on some doors and kept on it daily with hunting these groundhogs, and that's really what lit the fire under me. And I continue to do that, but from there I got into bow hunting whitetails, got into bow hunting turkeys, And now in present day, fast forward 10 years or so, my top priority is for sure whitetails. And here in central Pennsylvania, we're blessed with awesome opportunities to hunt whitetails. The population is terrific out here. The public land is terrific. Over the past 4 or so years of me living here, I've got permission to a lot of private land. And my primary goal with bow hunting for whitetails is the venison. As we talked about earlier, I've got a new daughter here who's 3 months old, and my wife likes venison. And the past couple of seasons, I have made it my goal to harvest enough whitetails with a bow to not have to buy beef for the entire year.
Yes, sir. I love that. It's an awesome goal.
Thank you. I've been able to do that the past 2 years. 2 years ago, I harvested 4 deer with a bow. And then last year, I harvested 5 deer with a bow. And this year, the goal is around the same, to, again, essentially just be self-sustaining. I live in a very, very rural area here in central PA. We have our own egg-laying chickens. We're raising meat chickens this year. Going to be bow hunting for whitetails. Kind of taking on that whole goal of producing as much food as we can. So that's my priority for bow hunting. I am very much so a bow hunter who hunts deer. I do not target mature whitetails. I've been partially lucky, partially strategic in harvesting 2 mature bucks in the past 2 seasons, but it hasn't been because that has been my main effort or goal. I just love hunting deer, and I do a lot of traditional bow hunting for deer in that challenge, and I do hunt with my compound still. And I love just better understanding the landscapes that I'm hunting, better understanding the animal, getting more fine-tuned with my strategy to make that happen, as far as being able to harvest that number of deer here in Pennsylvania without any food plots or anything like that. It's woodsmanship, leading the land. And
I love that, man. It's awesome.
Thank you. I have found that, particularly in the past 2 years, as I've just gotten better at hunting deer, as far as getting close to deer, putting myself in the areas with higher deer numbers, reading sign, and things of that nature, it has paid off not only on the front of harvesting deer for venison, but also for mature bucks too. You're
getting good at reading where to be.
Yeah. There's I found definitely a correlation there, where when you hunt deer, you tend to put yourself in the best area. And when you put yourself in the best area and the best setup, that produces the opportunities that are close enough with a bow to be able to capitalize on, whether it's a doe or a mature buck. So,
yep. It was so cool that you touched on. I literally have completely forgotten about how I really got into bow hunting. And we grew up in a rural area, and that's exactly how I got into bow hunting, really. I mean, I started off with groundhogs, and
cool.
I would just peek around. We had some little swells in the hills, and I'd just peek up and be like, oh, there's one.
Yeah.
And I'd just stalk up. And I got to tell this story just because it's pretty funny and comical. Have you shot one and had it charge you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're mean little bastards. They are.
My grandpa
it scared me to death the first time it happened. I put a broadhead through. I waited for him to stand up, drilled him right in the chest, and I was like, oh my God, whatever. It's probably I only killed 2 groundhogs at this time. And most of the time they run away from you and go die in their hole or something. But this time, this little sucker chased me down, man. And I literally was lucky enough to find a 2x4 laying there. And I mean, it sounds brutal, but I mean, what was I supposed to do? Let him attack me? I mean,
my grandpa used to say if groundhogs were as big as bears, he would never walk through a hayfield. Because
right,
because
they're
when
honored.
95% of the time they are wary, they don't want anything to do with you. But sometimes if you get between them and their hole, or you do something that makes them feel like they have to stand their ground, they are about as mean as any animal out there.
Yeah.
It's pretty
And
interesting. Yeah.
nobody talks about that at all. I mean, most
No.
people that shoot groundhogs do it with a rifle, so they
Sure.
don't really
Sure.
get to
They don't
experience that.
experience that. Yeah.
But when you're like 15 yards from them and they see
Yeah.
you and you put an arrow through them, they're coming after you.
Yeah.
If it's like, I guess a male, I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, man, that's super super funny. At least we can
Yeah.
share that experience.
Yeah. It's cool.
So how old are you, man? I should have asked this earlier, but I mean, how long have you been doing this?
I am 29.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Yeah. So you've been pretty much bow hunting, I guess, for what, 12, 13 years or so?
About strictly bow hunting, about 10.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I really got bit hard. My dad, for me, yeah, he was a bow hunter, but just timing wise, we lost a really good property. We used to hunt on the eastern shore of Maryland, and it really kind of gave him a bad taste in his mouth because I think he went from being a meat hunter to being a trophy hunter, and then when we lost that property, it was just like hard for him to be able to chase big bucks like he wanted to be.
Yeah.
So he kind of lost interest in it.
Sure.
And I really dove into bow hunting, and I just picked it up when I was probably 18, and then it was just full on. How can I went from killing whatever walked for a couple years to
absolutely.
I really got bit by the bug to target like bigger deer. And
Sure.
when you go from being efficient at killing to then wanting to target mature deer, it's like, hey, you can pretty much have your pick if you want to fill the freezer. But we had a extremely target rich environment, so filling the freezer and shooting does was really not much of a challenge like where I grew up at. But it's I understand, man, where you're at in Pennsylvania, it can be a challenging thing, especially for targeting like good deer. There's a lot of hunters too. I would say there's probably a strong percentage of our guests we've had on this podcast that are from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. I know bow hunting culture is extremely strong in PA.
Yes. Yeah. I think we're definitely in the top 3 for the amount of bow hunters that we have. And I think we might be up in that number 1 or number 2 spot as far as total number of bow hunters, and then density
Absolutely.
of bow hunters. Where I came from, I moved from 4 years ago. I moved from Southwest Pennsylvania, and I believe the most recent statistics I've seen is that Southwest Pennsylvania has the highest density of bow hunters in the country. And even if it's not there anymore, it's high. So a lot of competition. There are a lot of deer. Deer are pressured. In my area where I've moved to, the landscape is very vast. So we've got a lot of, like I said, it's a very rural area. A lot of my area and the surrounding area is relatively poor for agriculture. So there's not a lot of farms. And what that equates to is, since there's not a ton of agriculture here, a lot of the landscape has been either left as timber. Most of it's been logged at some point. Most of it's been stripped. Most of it's been mined. So you've got a lot of variety in the landscape here. But the point being is a lot of it holds deer. So like there's not a lot of like open space, hay fields, ag fields where it doesn't hold deer for a lot of the year. So I guess the point I'm getting to, a lot of places for deer to go. They disperse a lot. They avoid human interaction, human hunting pressure a lot. So it's definitely, it took me every bit of 4 years. I feel like last year, my 4th year here living in this area compared to suburban Western Pennsylvania, it took me to that 4th year to really finally have a good grasp on knowing how to hunt this area, knowing what strategies to use, what mistakes not to make, things that did work in Southwest Pennsylvania that do not work here, and really just kind of totally revamping my approach to hunting. So
just kind of like honing that woodsmanship for your area. Because I feel like it's a major thing in Pennsylvania where you guys are at, really focusing on, what trees you're hunting and what areas and elevation and stuff like that. It's a lot more important than some other areas. Like, it was different for me moving from Maryland here to Kentucky. It was just so much more vast. The deer density is not near the same. I remember having some friends come out here and they're like, "Where's the deer at?" And they're like, "Why aren't we seeing deer?" And I'm like, this is how
Yeah.
it is. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but when you do see a buck and he's like around 3 or 4 years old, he's pretty decent size.
Sure.
So it's like, it's a little bit different. You kind of got to get used to being skunked a lot of times, but eventually, it's going to happen for you. It's just one of those kind of deals.
Right.
Christian, it has been great talking with you, brother. I really appreciate your
you as well,
time,
Justin.
especially being a new dad, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
How can some of our listeners that are interested maybe in, jumping on a program with you? I know you offer, maybe just real quick before we leave, break down a couple of the programs that you offer. Because
Sure.
I did some digging on you before you came on here, and I thought that was awesome, man. I'm definitely intrigued, and like I said, I'm going to jump on board, and I'll holler at you and get on board with it.
Yeah, certainly. So, as we talked about in the beginning, my number one goal is to help bow hunters, help archers either be proactive in preventing issues, or if you currently have shoulder issues or issues that are preventing you from enjoying and feeling comfortable with shooting. My goal is to help with that. And to be able to best help with that, I have tried to provide all different levels of solutions for you based on what you're looking for, because some people want, full on one-on-one close communication and guidance and customized personalized work to help with their issue, and I offer that at the highest level. And then at the very lowest level, on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, I try to put out as much educational information as possible. So there's that lowest free option where there's a bunch of different videos and things to pull from. If you're just looking to start to apply some of these different tools that we've talked about and more, there's lots of free stuff I try to put out to be helpful. Then the next tier up, I have a simple yet effective course. It's a course that I call Archery Stronger Shoulders. And essentially it gives you the bare bones, the bare essentials of some corrective exercise, rehab, and strength training, just a few minutes, a few times per week, to be able to start to implement that before or after shooting. That's just going to start to get you into a better place with feeling better in your shoulders, more comfort, less pain, more confidence in your shoulders, better overall function to serve your shooting and in general life too. So there's that lower tier option. It's just $10 a month. I try to make it as accessible as possible. And then there's some middle ground programs and offerings that I have to back up to that highest level offering, which is working with me personally. I take on clients here and there. I'm pretty much full in books right now, but kind of on a case-by-case basis, I take on clients. And then in the future, I anticipate some more spots will open up for one-on-one clients. So if that's something you're interested in, reach out to me. Keep an eye out for when I open up for more clients. And again, my goal is just to be as helpful as possible, keep guys shooting, keep guys feeling their best with shooting, or get them back to feeling better with shooting. So the probably last thing I could leave with this message is if you're having an issue or you don't want to have an issue, my encouragement for people is always to really dig deep into your why, meaning, why do you want to keep doing this? Why do you want to prevent an issue? Why do you want to fix an issue? And a lot of times that deeply rooted why is going to be the driving factor to making that step, making that small change into being proactive or taking action into doing something. Because it's hard. Like I said, we all have jobs, families, whatever it might be, and we only have so much time and energy. But when you have that deeply rooted why of what is pushing you to take that extra step or again take action, that can be a big role player, and it normally leads us into better places. So I'm here to help.
I love it, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Guys, I hope you're still listening at this point. Follow Christian on Archery Strong. I'm going to tag him on our Instagram and on Facebook. He's got a YouTube. Like he said, so much awesome information. I mean, you've done a great job laying out so many different,
thank you,
factors. And really, I've really enjoyed how you're breaking down, even like taking a picture of yourself and showing your muscle groups and what you're doing and why you're doing this exercise and what you're doing. So keep up the great work, brother. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward. I'll definitely keep in touch with you.
Awesome. That sounds great, Justin. Thanks for the great conversation. Thanks for everybody spending their time listening today.
Absolutely. Y'all stay tuned. We got some more great episodes coming up. I hope you're having a great day.